r/AskReddit. What is the most mysterious/paranormal thing you've witnessed? Scariest moment of my life happened while my friend and I were camping in eastern Canada as teenagers. We decided to sleep in this abandoned camper we found deep in a large forest that was near our town. It had been there so long that small trees had grown around it. We'd stumbled across it when we were exploring a few months back and thought it would be cool, and brave, to sleep there for a night. So one weekend we did it. We arrived after dark because we had gotten lost trying to find the camper. We had a really low power flashlight, so it made it even more difficult. Once we finally found it, we opened the rusty door and stepped in. The sounds inside the camper were shrill and echoey. There were typical camper things strewn about: cups, empty cans, swollen pulp fiction novels. Already tired, we holed up in one end of the camper where the bed area had originally been before the cushions had rotted away to almost nothing. A long hallway stretched the length of the camper so we could basically see from end to end. It was a miserable night. There were several rats living in there. I saw them staring at us from a chewed out part of the ceiling. When the wind blew outside, the camper would shriek and groan. We even thought we heard a bear outside too, walking around. Still, we feigned bravery and acted like we were having a good time. But we were on edge. At some point I woke up from an uncomfortable sleep. I sat up to adjust myself when I noticed some movement out of the corner of my eye. At the other end of the camper, there was a small window, and as I looked at it I saw a man's silhouette. He was clearly staring straight at me from outside. At first I thought maybe it was a weird shape of a tree or something. But when I moved a bit to get a better look, the person clearly reacted and then froze. My heart was pumping and I woke up my friend immediately, saying someone is here over and over and over in a whisper, not taking my eyes off his profile. He woke up immediately and I nodded towards the window. He saw him too. We whispered frantically about who it could be and why was he staring at us. And for the next 10 minutes, no joke, we stared him down. The longer we stared at him, the more frightened we got. Occasionally he would move, but always keeping his eyes locked on us. Eventually I shouted at him, "Hey!" No reaction. My friend was braver than me and decided to shine the flashlight at him. As soon as he did, we realized our horrible mistake. It wasn't a window at all on the other side of the camper. It was a mirror. We had been staring down ourselves from the very start. Completely idiotic. Still, it was the most fearful, relieving and funny moment of my life that I'll never forget it. Closest to paranormal I've ever been. Posted this before. I was living in an apartment with 3 roommates at the time. I was working all sorts of weird hours, and would stay up late most nights. Our apartment had 2 hallways that formed an capital L. My room is at the top of the L, the bathroom was in the corner of where the lines meet, with the door being in the inside middle of the small section. In the outside corner was the living room. I walked out of my room to go to the bathroom. No need to turn the light on as this was a trek I had made hundreds of times before. As I left the bathroom I turned to go back to my room. Just as I turned off the lights of the bathroom, there, standing where the short hallway and the living room met, there was a teenage girl standing there. Wearing a white flowery dress, just smiling. She didn't look evil, just a normal person standing there smiling at me. I freaked the fuck out and went running for my room. About 20 minutes later I finally came out of my room, turning all the lights on as I went through the apartment. She was nowhere to be seen, however where I saw her standing was noticeably colder than the rest of the apartment should have been for an August evening. Creepy, but not the worst part. I lived there for about another year, and I never saw her again. After I had moved out I was hanging out with my one roommate who had the bedroom at the end of the small hallway, right next to the bathroom. We were talking and I told him that I never felt comfortable in the apartment after something happened. To which he responded, "Oh, you saw her too." I nearly drove off the road when I heard this. We then both described her, finishing off each other's sentences describing her. He had seen her twice. I was indifferent about ghosts before that. Now I believe in them or believe in something. It was very creepy, and every time I tell the story the hairs stand up on my arms. TLDR, I saw a little girl staring at me from the second story of an abandoned mental hospital. Long version. Me and some buddies were bored one night and decided to head out and poke around an abandoned mental hospital. The only way in was through the autopsy room, the rest of the place was pretty much sealed off. So we go in, me, another guy and two girls. As soon as we get into the autopsy room, one of the girls starts hyperventilating and crying. She said she just couldn't be there anymore. We tried everything we could to convince her everything was going to be fine, to no avail. She wanted to leave, and wanted to leave now. Disappointed, we decided we had to leave. The two girls were walking in front of us, one trying to comfort the other, while me and the other dude walked a bit of a way behind. I don't know what brought me to look back, morbid curiosity maybe. But I did. Now, I'll admit it was dark, but the moon was out so it wasn't pitch black. Still, I know what I seen. A window on the second floor, what looked just like a little girl in a white dress staring back at us. I looked for a good 10 seconds, stopped my buddy and had him look without taking my eyes off the thing, and asked him specifically, "Do you fucking see that?" I thought I may have been seeing things, or maybe it was a trick of the light. But no, we both saw it and stared for a good 20 seconds after. I might have thought it was some kind of trick, but after 20 seconds or so, it moved. We noped the fuck out of there, passing the girls and screaming at them to get in the car. Is it possible it could have been some other people there, who happened to bring a girl who might have looked from a distance to be a lot younger than she was? Yes. There were no other cars around though, so whoever it was would have had to walk a pretty good distance to get there. It could have also been a homeless family that was using the place for warmth. Who knows? All I know is what I saw. It was a little girl, in a white dress, staring at us from the second-story window of an abandoned mental joint. At 2 in the goddamn morning. My grandfather passed away just a few weeks after I was born. Never met the guy, never knew what he looked like. When I was 5 years old, I started to see this man in our rocking chair. I called him the rocking chair man. My parents thought it was that imaginary friend stage, but it started to bug them when I told them every single day. They finally questioned me about it. I told them every detail I could remember, and finally they showed me a picture of a man. It was my grandfather. To this day, I'm 22 now, every time I dream, he is in the background somewhere. I remember when I dreamed about my high school graduation and I looked in the stands and I saw him with my parents. I like to think that he's just watching out for me and being there when he's not really there. So I am a true believer of the paranormal. I never believed in paranormal stuff and still don't, but about 3 years ago something happened to me and my wife that we still cannot explain. Since when I was a teenager I have problems waking up in the morning. Maybe it is because my sleeping schedule is off, maybe I just have a very deep sleep. Getting me to wake up really takes some effort. So one Christmas my grandmother gave me a radio alarm as a present, because I kept ignoring my ringing alarm constantly. And she gave me a good piece of advice: if you really need to wake up, just turn the wheel to select the radio station to the far left and the volume all the way up. This is what I did on all important occasions and it really worked like a charm. There is no way I could overhear the whispering irritating noise of static at full volume. Unfortunately my grandmother died a few years after. Fast forward to a point 3 years ago. It had been a hard week for both me and my wife and we were sound asleep on a Friday night, when suddenly the radio alarm went off, in the middle of the night. This did not wake me up, but my wife did because she could not make it stop. The alarm was set to off and it still kept going. I tried everything and after 10 minutes managed to somehow make it stop. We went back to sleep, but after about 15 minutes the radio started to play again. I must have hit the snooze button. There was no way to shut the alarm up, so I cussed and swore and just pulled the plug. Back to sleep. My wife and I almost jumped out of our bed when the alarm went off again, screeching, yelling and whistling static at full volume. It is hard to describe the feeling, somewhere between panic, confusion, and adrenaline flowing through you. I know I pulled the plug. I saw that no lights were blinking, no clock, just the black radio alarm. My wife panicked and ran out of the room while I kept staring at the alarm, unable to do anything but be scared. Then all of a sudden it went quiet, and through the silence I heard the muffled sound of our telephone, barely audible from the living room. I went to find it and found it stuck between the couch and a large pillow. The number calling was my mother's. It turned out that my mother had been home alone when she fell on the way back from the bathroom to her bedroom and broke her hip. Unable to move, she lay there helpless and desperately tried to call someone for help with her mobile phone that had been in her bath cloak. Had the radio alarm not woke us up, we would have gone on a weekend trip the next morning. This is the creepiest, most paranormal thing I have ever witnessed. This may seem like it's fake, but what I'm about to say is 100% true. When my mother was young, she was very sick and needed medicine. Not all people in the area we lived liked Native Americans, which we are, so we relied on a local medicine man. Years later, we discovered that the medicine she was getting wasn't helping her anymore because she wasn't sick, she was haunted. She remembers seeing a demonic figure when she was younger, but at the time, she didn't know if it was real or not. This happened from when she could start to remember things up to when she was about 5. Well, 30 years later, that demonic figure started showing up again. But I know she wasn't just imagining it, because I could see it, hear it, and sometimes even feel something, like some sign of its presence. She started having nightmares, and we all knew what was happening. We decided to move back to our reserve to see if the problem or haunting was with the house, but it wasn't. No matter where she went, this thing followed her and us. I'll be honest, for a very long time, I thought she was basically faking it, until one night. My mom used to cope with this haunting by drinking tea and coloring. This night, she was coping in the living room, and nothing seemed to be happening, so none of us expected that anything would happen. Suddenly, we heard screaming in the living room coming from my mom, and we all ran to see what was wrong. She was crying and screaming that something was scratching her back. I didn't believe her until I lifted the back of her shirt and ducking saw it with my own eyes. She was being scratched. There weren't just scratches already there, but scratch marks kept appearing as I watched, big, long, and red, over and over. I was terrified. I ran to grab some sweet grass, and I was across the house when I heard the door open. It turns out my mom was walking towards the lake. Keep in mind that it's a Canadian winter, so it was about -35, not sure if F or C, but they'd actually be very close in this case, when she walked outside, barefoot and wearing nothing but her pajamas. After it happened, she didn't remember it, and to this day doesn't remember that night, but I still remember everything. We're afraid that it's starting to happen again. She is having brutal nightmares, and the entire family is starting to see black shadow figures. Another terrifying sign of this, we have a cat, and from time to time we'll notice it staring at a fixed point as if it is looking at someone or something, then it'll run away as if it's scared. Asterisk edited for better reading and my lack of grammar, LMAO. Thanks to EdenBlade47. Trust me when I say I had pics on my camera, but they seem to be deleted. I'll try to take a look around. My grandmother died when I was very young. My grandfather passed when I was 17. Shortly after his passing, I dreamed I was with my grandma and we were catching up on all she had missed. She told me she had to go, but I begged for her to stay. She said she couldn't, but we would see each other again soon, and pointed to a calendar with the date October 16th circled on it. This was about 2 weeks from that date. A couple days later I dreamed I was with my cousin's husband, fishing on their property. It was just a chill, cool dream, but he kept taking about how this is it. This is forever. A few days later we got a call that my cousin's husband had been killed in a freak accident. While my parents went to the funeral out of state, my mom, who is real big into signs, begged me not to leave the house on the day my grandmother had indicated in my dream. Come October 16th, I get a phone call from a friend asking if I wanted to go into the city with him. I briefly explained the situation and declined. He said he'd come visit me after he got back to town. I didn't hear from him until super late that night from the hospital. He had been in an awful wreck, crushing the entire passenger side of his car. Well, thanks.